it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Oh, good evening, my curious friends, and welcome back to The Shadows. I'm your host for tonight's descent into the strange and the macabre, a place where reality frays at the edges, and the unknown whispers just beyond the light. So dim the lamps, lock the doors, and settle in. Tonight we'll wander through tales that twist the familiar into something far darker. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Cabin in the Woods by G.R. Dark. It was the beginning of fall when my friend Bill and I decided to go hunting out in the woods. We had an elk tag and decided to bring our girlfriends with us. Now, allow me to introduce myself. My name's Eric, and my girlfriend's name is Wendy. My friend Bill's girlfriend was Ashley. We traveled in the same car and went to the plaza for supplies. We only brought one rifle and a pistol with us, a .30-06 and a .357 Magnum for self-defense against bears. Bill had a cabin out in the woods that was a 4-hour drive. It has 2 rooms and an outhouse, so it was good enough for us. We'd arrived at the cabin and unpacked our stuff, and the time was around 4 p.m, so we still had some time to go out and look for our elk. The girls wanted to stay at the cabin and relax, and told us that they'd have dinner ready when we got back. So Bill and I got our hunting stuff, and we were on our way to a secret hunting spot where we always find a good-sized elk. We were about halfway to our spot when the park ranger pulled us over and started to inspect our vehicle. "Why are you searching us? We haven't even shot anything yet," Bill asked. "Well, I could see that, but I'm not looking for poachers. A little girl was kidnapped while camping with her parents. Parents said what looked like a 9-foot-tall skinny shadow with antlers on its head ripped a hole in their tent and grabbed her," the ranger said. And he said the father tried to hold on to the little girl, but was overpowered by the creature as the mom just watched in shock, not believing what she was seeing. "The parents didn't have a pistol?" I asked. "No, the family was only here to camp and only had a bear mace, but it was in their vehicle," he replied. "The father said once the thing grabbed his daughter, he ran out into the woods. Last thing he heard was his daughter crying and screaming, 'Daddy!' Now, if you guys see anything like that or know of the little girl's whereabouts, come to a ranger tower and ask for Rick," he continued. "Oh, yes, sir, we will," I said, and then he went back to his car and left. "I know where a ranger station is if we see anything. That sounds like a Wendigo. Might have come from the tribal land on the other side," said Bill. "Don't be a racist, Bill," I laughed. "Not all the Native Americans are witches and do black magic." "How do you know, Eric?" Bill replied. "I worked with a couple back in the day. I have friends that are Native American," I explained. We then drove to our spot and sat down for a couple of hours, calling an elk when we finally attracted one. Bill had shot it, and it ran away from us. We tracked it for a couple of hours when I noticed the sun was starting to set. "Yeah, how about we come back in the morning and look for it?" I suggested. "No," he objected. "What if it's still alive?" I said. "No," Bill said. "Bill, it's getting too dark. Even if we see him and he's still alive, you won't be able to see through your scope." And that's when the elk started to scream. "There he is," said Bill as we ran to the location where it was. We heard something growl, like, well, something I'd never heard before. The elk started to scream like it was being torn apart. "Shit," Bill said as we ran faster to the elk. I grabbed the .357 and started to fire it in the direction the elk was screaming to scare whatever it was off. When we got to the elk, there was nothing but the head and its back legs. The rest of the elk had been torn to pieces. "Oh, shit," Bill exclaimed. "Do you think that was a bear?" I asked. "I don't know," he replied. "Let's just get the head, tag it, and go back to the cabin." "All right, but let's tell Ranger Rick that a bear's out here," Bill said. "Okay, we will, tomorrow." We grabbed the head and packed it into the truck, then went back to the cabin. We got back home and Wendy was cooking burgers and chili over the fire. "Yeah, the boys are here," Wendy yelled to Ashley, informing her of our arrival. Bill looked at me and said, "Don't say anything about what Ranger Rick said." "Okay," I simply replied. We got out and went over to the girls and sat down to eat outside. We were about to finish the food when Ashley asked how the elk hunt had gone. "It was a goddamn bear that got our elk when we shot it, so we just took the head and called it good," Bill said. "That's too bad. But how about we have a couple of shots to celebrate for the elk head?" Ashley suggested. Bill yelled, "Oh, that's just what I need. It was a long day." Ashley pulled out a half-gallon of whiskey and started to take shots with Bill. Wendy came over and said, "How about you, Eric? Want some?" "Yeah, that'll take whatever happened today off of my mind," I said. We started to get a little drunk when I had to take a piss. The outhouse was behind the cabin. I went to use it and noticed it was really dark back there. The fire was the only light we had, and it was in front of the cabin. I just pissed where they couldn't see me. I was looking in the dark when I noticed a tall, skinny figure with glowing red eyes watching me. I got spooked and ran back to the others with my pants unbuttoned. When I got there, Bill was laughing at me while looking at my unbuttoned pants. I told them that something was out there watching us. Bill didn't believe me, just said that maybe I'd drunk too much. Ashley said she and Wendy were getting tired and it was getting late, so we got ready for bed, turned out all the lights, and went to sleep. I got up around 11 p.m. to get a bottle of water in the cooler that was outside. And that's when I heard Wendy scream. I dropped my water and ran to the truck and grabbed the 357 and hurried back to the cabin. Ashley and Bill had turned on a lantern and were asking Wendy what was up. Wendy said that she was awakened by my voice, telling her to wake up and come to the back. She said that I was by the window, so she got up and looked out the window. That's when she saw a black figure with red eyes looking at her. She froze as the thing tried to grab her, mimicking my voice and saying her name. Wendy began to cry as I walked over to her and said, "Oh, don't cry, Wendy. It's nighttime. You'll only call it back or something else." "Call what back?" Ashley asked, wondering. It's nothing," Bill said. "We're all just really tired." "Bullshit, Bill. Sounds like the thing that took that little girl that Ranger Rick told us about." Ashley went to comfort Wendy as Bill and I were arguing. Then we all heard something jump onto the roof. It was mimicking a little girl's laugh as it ran around. It was calling for Wendy as it jumped off in front of the door. I gripped the 357, ready to fire it at the door. "Hey, don't shoot. We're still a little drunk, and we don't know if any of this is real," Bill said, stopping me from firing. He asked me to turn off the lantern and see if the thing would go away. But right when I turned it off, the thing opened the door and ran inside and grabbed Wendy. We just froze with fear as it dragged Wendy out of the door. Ashley was holding onto Wendy as it dragged both of them and yelled, "Help me, you freaking cowards!" I came and aimed the pistol at it and fired a couple of rounds. The thing dropped Wendy and ran outside before I could hit it again. Bill finally snapped out of it and said, "You guys stay here. I'm going to run to the truck, grab the rifle, and start the truck. We need to get the hell out of here." "Bill, don't. What if that thing's still out there?" Ashley asked. "Okay, if you guys want to stay here with that thing, be my guests," Bill yelled. "I'm going to start the truck and get my rifle, get you guys so we can get out of here. Eric, you close the door when I run to the truck." "Bill, I only have 4 more rounds in the pistol," I said. "That's why we gotta get out of here," Bill yelled, and then ran to the truck. I closed the door after he left and said, "Right, you guys better get ready." They nodded their heads. We heard the truck start up. That's when we heard a shot out of the 30-06 and Bill scream. We waited for 30 minutes in the pitch dark inside the cabin, but Bill did not come back. Ashley began to start crying for Bill, but I told her to try and keep it in. "There's no crying at night, Ashley. It'll only bring that thing back. We need to make a run to the truck and get to the ranger station. Ashley said, "What about Bill? I'm not going to leave him here." "Look, we'll get the rangers to help us find Bill when we come back," I reassured her. We ran to the truck and saw nothing of the 3006 on the ground. There was no trace of Bill. I grabbed the rifle and told the girls to get in. Wendy got in first, and Ashley was about to get in when she heard Bill's voice. "Ashley, help me," Bill's voice said. "Where are you?" "I'm behind the cabin. Hurry," cried Bill. Ashley started to run to where Bill's voice was when I told her to stop because it could be that thing mimicking Bill. But Ashley didn't care and started calling out Bill's name, running out into the woods. Wendy hurried and closed the door. I got in and punched it out of there. I don't know what happened to Ashley and Bill, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. It took about an hour to get to the ranger station, and when we got there it looked like the thing had beaten us to it. There was no one there, but huge claw marks on the walls. I got out and told Wendy to stay in the car, and if anything happened, to just leave me there. I went inside the ranger station to find that Ranger Rick had been decapitated. Then I heard Wendy scream, and I immediately ran back outside. I could see the thing standing there, holding Wendy by the neck. It was 9 feet tall, skinny with glowing red eyes and deer antlers on its head. Wendy screamed for me to help her, but I just ran inside the ranger station and closed the door as the thing took off with her. I waited for the thing to come and get me too, but it didn't. I fell asleep until morning. I got up and went out to the truck. It had run out of gas, so I gathered up what little food and ammunition I had left and got ready for another night of hell. I found this journal to write about what had happened to us. So, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. My advice to you is don't cry at night. If you happen to go to the Native American reservation, find a medicine man to bless you off and bless this cabin off. And they would know what that thing was or what happened here. Well, they should know. It's right by their land, and that's all I know. Until then, goodbye. Fugue State by Blake Blizzard. I'm typing my experiences out right now so future humans might understand what happened to me. Maybe someone will share the same experience. Maybe it'll help them, and I hope it does. Nothing has been able to help me to this point. In fact, when I'm done writing this, I'll be dead. My brain works differently than most. I know most people could say that, well, in the truest technical summarization of that statement, I suppose every single person's brain works in a different way. I'll explain more about me specifically later. For now, I want to paint a picture for you. That's one aspect of how I think. I feel better if the reader gets the most complete picture they can from the author. You can, of course, fill in the blanks and use your imagination to see what you want. But I'd rather over-explain my setting to you. If you don't want to hear it, then that's your prerogative. So before I start waxing my disturbing tale, let me start by describing my writing area. I'm using a low to mid-level laptop to write this. It's an HP, I'm not sure of the model or anything else about it. I use good old Microsoft Word, no fancy programs. The desk itself is an old hand-me-down from my grandpa. It's wood, maybe mahogany, and it has 3 drawers on either side. Currently all 6 drawers are unoccupied. I have one of those older style lamps with the green half-glass shades on top, if that makes sense. The base is gold with a long chain to pull that turns it on and off. I probably don't need to explain how lamps work to you. The lamp is to my right. I have one of those cheap plastic office organizers with pens, paper clips, post-its and the like, right next to it. I'm not sure why, to be honest. I don't even need to clip or note anything. And to my left is a notepad. It's the one with the black and white cover that kind of resembles TV static. Next to that is a grey stone coaster with a glass of Canadian whiskey sitting on it. I already feel better now that I've given you all that general description of where I am at this moment. Knowing that I won't be on this earth soon feels okay now. Someone will read this, and it'll help. The whiskey will help me at the end too. It started 20 years ago. Until that moment, I was a normal person. A little bit obsessive with a side of compulsion, but still as normal as the next. Now let me clarify, I was normal until I met Killjoe. One moment I'm taking a quick nap in my university's library, and the next moment I'm watching a violent stranger strangling a woman until her eyes almost popped out of her head. I'll never forget that face staring back at me, and I'll definitely never forget what he says. Nice to meet you. You finally unlocked the Killjoe. And with that, he was gone. I stood there, stunned, staring at the lifeless body of this poor unknown woman. I didn't even know how far from the library I'd travelled. I'd been studying so hard I must have just lost it and sleepwalked, or I don't know. Distant sounds of sirens snapped me out of my frozen state. I didn't want to be here when the police showed up. Even though that wasn't that long ago, it was around the time when security cameras and surveillance was not as prevalent as it is now. Well, good thing, because I didn't even consider that when I hightailed it away from that murder scene. I realized only later how that would look caught on camera. I would of course be able to explain myself. It's not every day you almost bump into someone choking another human to death. I mean, how would you react? I'm not the toughest guy in the jungle, and clearly I had all flight and no fight when I saw what was happening. I never went to look for any online articles about what happened, or any local newspaper articles, which was still a thing back 20 plus years ago. I could only focus on what that psycho had said to me. Nice to meet you. You've finally unlocked the Killjoe. What in the hell does that mean? Why would he say that to me? I mean, to me, of all people. Why was he even there? I still have to figure that part out too. College is a stressful time, especially the first couple of semesters. It's well known that mental illness can develop in a lot of younger people at this time. You're taken from your parents' home or wherever you've been spending the last 0 to 18 years of your life. You're expected to pretty much immediately turn into an adult. Find friendships as soon as possible, try new things, drink, smoke, experiment. Start the dating process, or the hookup process, whatever your preference. And on top of that, you're attempting to better your own future by obtaining a piece of paper that may give you a more comfortable life, or it might do nothing. Well, it's stressful, as I said. After stewing on what happened for about 2 weeks, the memory started to very quietly fade away. I forgot about the dead woman, and I forgot about Killjoe. I went about my life as normal. I hung out with my roommate, who turned out to be a pretty decent guy. I requested a 2-person dorm for my freshman year, which is rare to get. I somehow got one. I'm not the most outgoing dude, and I assume anyone that applies for a 2-person room is the same. I could do with 1 roomie, 4 or more, although I didn't think that'd be good for me. We got along so well, in fact, that we decided to go in on a real apartment our sophomore year. It's only a few miles away from campus. Now, I should mention that there were no major incidents relating to my own mental health or Killjoe for my freshman year. I didn't know that was my last good year, probably of my life. As I was finishing my Psych 200 class, go figure, I was studying psychology for my chosen major. I was stopped dead in my tracks by the man I hadn't seen in roughly 12 months. This time I took the initiative, as I knew this day was probably going to come again. "Hi, Joe," I said. The man, demon, spirit I was looking at actually cracked a smile. He didn't reveal any sharp snake teeth or a forked tongue, though. He had perfect white teeth, all 32 or however many a regular adult is supposed to have. "I like your place," Joe said to me. "It's just far enough away to get some work done, but close enough to the easy access of merchandise." I wasn't going to let this go much longer. Okay, Joe. I'm not going to have you break down exactly what's going on here, but why you're talking to me or whatever. I'm fairly certain you're an issue in my head, and I'll be taking full charge of you, so don't get comfortable. I studied him then for any kind of tell. Well, I'll give it to him. He was unmoving. He just stood there staring at me, a battle of minds. Finally, after not giving in, he smiled again. He then straightened out the pinstripe suit he was wearing, fixing the collar and shooting his cuffs. He did have impressive cufflinks with the money S symbol on them. I've always loved pinstripes, even though it's so outdated. Okay, Joe said with a voice that seemed to drop 20 octaves. Well, I meant what I said about your apartment. Good call on that place. Looks like everything's coming together for you. Except you have to figure out what to do with that. At the final word he spoke, his right arm had raised, extending his index finger and attempting to draw my attention to something behind me. I'll never forget that point. It's that kind where you make your finger look like an inchworm, retracting it towards you and extending it away from you. Confused, I slowly looked behind me. What I saw was the most brutal, inhuman scene of destruction anyone could have ever witnessed. It was another woman, I think. Her abdomen was shredded, no clothes, no identifying features. The long hair was the only thing that made me believe she was female. Otherwise, it was like a pile of red goo. No one should have to see anything like that. And when I looked back to Joe, he was, of course, gone. This time I called the police myself and described Kill Joe to them, to a T. They were very nice to me and didn't detain me or bring me downtown for further questions. Except I was completely lying and bolted from the scene just like the last time I saw Kill Joe. When I got back to my apartment, I locked the door and ran to my room, also locking that door. After calming my breathing for 20 minutes, my flip phone buzzed, scaring the absolute shit out of me. When I flipped it open, I saw a missed call from my roommate. Texting wasn't a huge thing at that time. I calmed myself again and called him back. Hey, we're still good for movie night, right? Oh, of course, it's Thursday. My roomie and I have been watching a new movie at home every night on Thursday for quite some time now. Neither of us had classes on Friday, so I suppose that's how it started. Of course, I choked out. Can't wait. We decided on Spider-Man, which had just come out on DVD. I was pumped, as it turned out to be a great movie and spawn a legitimate franchise. Funny how, as I'm writing this, that the newest Spider-Man No Way Home movie just came out. The worst part of the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie was what happened to me at the very end. The last thing I remember is watching the credits. Immediately after, I was standing outside the front door of my apartment, unlocking the door and walking in. My roommate was sitting at the dining table. He dropped his spoon into his cereal, which I think was Cinnamon Toast Crunch. His face looked comically disbelieving. I said something like, "What's up?" He then broke down that I hadn't been around for a while, 2 months to be exact. Luckily, I'd left my portion of the rent for him, but besides that, I wasn't able to be contacted. He called the authorities and my parents and put up posters around campus. I laughed, thinking this was a dumb joke. He was somewhat of a prankster, so I assumed he was just being funny, even though it was a pretty lame attempt. He then shocked me, saying that he thought I'd been kidnapped and maybe even killed. There had been a rash of disappearances and deaths on the campus. We had a serial killer in the area. I knew what was happening. My head was spinning, and I went to my room. He didn't say another word as I shut my door. At this moment, I knew what was going on. I dropped out that night, packed a few boxes of my personal belongings, and went back home. My parents didn't question me much, as they didn't understand fully what was happening. I made something up like I just couldn't continue with my studies right now, but I couldn't tell them the truth. As you've all probably surmised by now, I am Kill Joe. The worst thing was, I liked what was happening. I fully embraced my alter ego. Knowing some basic psychology, I knew I'd developed a dissociative identity disorder. I was in a fugue state. I blacked out for weeks, months at a time. During these episodes, I maimed, I murdered, and I destroyed. This has been happening for decades now. Well, I said at the beginning of this tale that I'd be dead by the end of this. I'll be dead soon because I'm going to kill myself. I can't let this destruction go on, and I won't turn myself in either. I'm not ending my life inside a concrete cell. I'm ending it on my terms. I'm sorry to the families I've disrupted forever. I'm sorry that I love it so much too. Killjoy is too strong. He craves blood and notoriety above life. I'm trying to explain everything to the best of my ability before the darkness sets in. I can feel it now. The corners of my mouth are starting to blacken. I can't fight it. I hope you understand. Coming home from my menial 9-to-5 job, I toss my keys in the bowl by my door like I do every day. I throw my jacket up on the back of my front door and start a little coffee pot to end my day. As the Seattle's best is brewing, I head to my office. The familiar solid wood desk is calling to me. The old-style lamp is on. My laptop's open. Weird, as I usually close it when I'm done browsing the internet or writing. A Word document's up. I smirk, reading the first few paragraphs. Another suicide note, eh? Oh, not today, my friend. Joe is very much still alive. Not going anywhere anytime soon. Down the Drain by L.M. Shale. After sprinkling parmesan over the mouth-watering chicken and spinach tortellini I just made, I scraped half the dish into the sink and turned on the garbage disposal with an irritated sigh. I hated having to throw half of it away each time. The only reason I moved into this apartment was because rent was cheaper after I'd lost my job and nearly burned through my meager savings. It definitely wasn't the suffocating ambience and sketchy neighborhood, and it most certainly wasn't the meal prep boxes left daily at my door. I only learned about those when the previous tenant visited me. Lita dropped by the very same day I moved in. After pointing out the leaky corners I should avoid, suggesting affordable roach traps, and teaching me how to lock the window with a broomstick, she mentioned the boxes. I thought she was kidding, but she was dead serious. I had to prepare dinner each day, dump half in the garbage disposal, and eat the rest right away. She seemed so nonchalant about it, but I wasn't. Who was sending them? Why? What would happen if I refused? Well, she had no solid answers. All she knew was what the previous tenant had told her, which is what they were told by the previous tenant, and so on. Origins unknown. Even the landlord had no idea that this was going on, and Lita stressed that I must never tell him. She also stressed that I must never refuse. Why? She said protection, claiming that for as long as she'd lived there, the apartment was never robbed. Was she seriously insinuating that this stupid requirement protected her? Well, she shrugged and said anything was possible. She didn't question the absurdity of it all, but she did question my reluctance. She assured me that she'd eaten from the boxes every day for the year she'd lived here, and they were legit. No prank, no poison, no strings attached. Just dump half in the garbage disposal and eat the rest right away. She began listing the various meals she'd prepared, and my empty stomach growled. I hadn't had a decent meal in days, and it didn't take me long before I caved. Now, after a month of delicious food, my unease had ebbed, but not my disdain. After I turned off the garbage disposal, I grabbed the remaining chicken and spinach tortellini and plopped down on the floor, eating my only meal today. Despite licking the plate clean, my stomach still complained, and I glared at the sink. Half a portion wasn't enough, and I was sick of wasting part of a perfectly good meal, one that I'd worked hard on, no less. I was done following these ridiculous rules. Tomorrow, I was going to eat the entire thing. And I did. For the next week, I prepared and ate the whole meal, and nothing happened. Well, I'll admit, I was nervous the first few days, but when the world didn't collapse and the boxes kept coming, I felt pretty clever for being the first to break this ridiculous and wasteful trend. As long as the food kept getting delivered right to my door, I was going to eat it. All of it. 8 days later, I realized my actions could have killed me. My bladder woke me up that night, and I shambled to the bathroom. After washing my hands, I made my way back to the sleeping bag, and I frowned at an unusual draft. Before I could figure out where it was coming from, a startling force knocked me to the ground. My heart leapt to my throat. It probably would have jumped out of my mouth if there wasn't a hand smothering my scream. The stench of sweat filled my lungs as I struggled beneath a bony weight, my panicked thoughts flashing terrifying scenarios through my mind. A sharp hiss for silence pierced my ear as the cold metal of a gun pressed against my temple, and I abided. Trembling face down on the floor, I held my breath, my eyes wide in fearful anticipation as I heard my attacker grunting and rummaging. I turned my gaze to the open window, and I cursed myself for not propping the broomstick properly as I saw it lying on the floor. In no time, the intruder had shoved a filthy rag in my mouth and yanked my arms behind my back, binding them before he lashed my ankles together. Only then did he take his weight off me and flip me over, his sunken eyes wild under a mess of hair. He was definitely on something, and it was frightening. His actions had no hesitation. He came here for something, and he wasn't leaving without it. The question was, what? That mystery didn't last long as he demanded to know where I hid my valuables. I stared at him in disbelief. Did he not see the squalor I was living in? I didn't even have furniture. Did he think I had cash stuffed in my frayed sleeping bag, gold hidden in the rusty oven, diamonds stashed behind the broken radiator? My baffled silence wasn't the answer he was looking for, and I cried out as he punched me in the face. He lifted his fist again, and I flinched, whimpering through my gag as I nodded towards my meager possessions, my wallet and my phone. He crawled over to them, and I crawled away, tears stinging my eyes as my cheek throbbed to the rhythm of my stuttering heart. I was certain that $11.25 and a phone with a cracked screen wouldn't be enough to appease him. He seemed desperate enough to kill. I had to save myself before it was too late. As he tore through my wallet in frustration, I made my way to the kitchen, my eyes on the drawers. I just needed a knife to cut through these bonds, and I could make a run for it. Balancing on my knees, I bent over and reached up with my hands, my trembling fingers searching for the handle. Gripping it, I pulled, but it didn't move. This was the worst time for it to stick. I wiggled it, as I always do, but my position was less than optimal, and the drawer refused to budge. After a particularly forceful yank, I lost my balance and fell with a grunt, and my terrified eyes turned towards the door as the intruder stomped in, gun aimed at me. I screamed and cowered against the cupboards, my heart slamming against my ribcage as the blood drained from my face. And then the blood drained from his face. I followed his petrified gaze, and I screamed even louder as an unholy creature erupted from the sink. It towered over us like a giant furry centipede, pointy legs bristling from its long, inky body and spikes jutting out of its mouth. With a lurching motion, looking almost as though it was falling, it descended upon the intruder, silencing his scream with a stab straight through his throat. It didn't silence my screams, though, and I continued to shriek through my gag as the monster continued to stab the man, its sharp legs jabbing at him like a macabre typewriter. It was facing away, but that didn't stop the spraying blood from dotting every surface of the kitchen, including me. After a final few jabs, the monster stopped puncturing the intruder, and I watched in horror as it began sliding the mutilated body into its mouth, its legs tapping against the cracked tiles with excitement, as though this was its first meal in ages. It devoured its kill the way a snake would, completely whole, and vomit fought my screams as it burned my throat. Once the last of the man disappeared, the creature gulped a few times and began spasming. For a hopeful moment I thought it was choking and dying, but to my terrified dismay, I realized it was crushing the body within its own as I heard bones snap and grind. Its convulsing stopped, and shock stole my screams as I watched its sharp legs retract into its blood-soaked fur. It now looked more like a giant fluffy caterpillar than a centipede, and my raspy breaths raced my pulse as I fearfully waited to see what it would do next. I stared in fraught disbelief as the monster began slithering across the floor, lapping up every drop of blood it came across before it stretched itself to reach the counters, walls, and ceiling. It was a lot more coordinated after eating, and that amplified my unease. Soon only my corner was left, and it turned to me, giving me my first clear view of its face. It wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined pincers, antennas, and compound eyes, but instead I saw a rounded snout, floppy ears, and deep scars where its eyes should be. In any other scenario, it might pass for cute, but right now all it did was reboot my vocal cords as it slithered closer. My muffled screams echoed as I pressed myself against the cupboards, petrified, but it didn't seem to care as it licked up the blood around me. When it began licking me, my heart almost stopped beating right then and there, as I was certain I was next on the menu. And then, it nuzzled me. I peeked through my eyelids, gulping, and I frowned in uneasy confusion as it curled up beside me, laying its large head on my lap. Slowly I allowed my screams to stop, my tense body quivering with adrenaline. It had murdered my attacker, cleaned up the crime scene, and now was snuggling. A knock on the door startled us as my neighbors asked if I was all right, and I gasped, afraid the monster would go after them. But to my surprise, it shrank away instead, slithering towards the sink and stretching itself thin before wiggling down the drain. The door crashed open and my neighbors ran in, the look on their faces matching mine as they saw me bound in the corner, quaking with shock. After they freed me and I found my voice, I mentioned the robber, but I gave him a happier ending as I claimed he'd run away. As much as the creature terrified me, it had saved my life, and I didn't want it to get in trouble. Besides, who'd believe me? Maybe Lida would. I decided to call her in the morning, but that left me up all night thinking. Was that creature the thing that we'd been feeding all this time? Was Lida right? Was it here to protect us? Was it too weak to scare off the robber before he attacked me because I'd unintentionally starved it for over a week? And despite all that, did it care for me that much that it didn't eat me, saved my life, and snuggled? I hope that was the case. The creature didn't seem malevolent towards me, but there were still many unanswered questions and uncertainties, and I hoped Lida could answer them. But she couldn't. I didn't mention the monster right away, afraid she'd be clueless and think I was insane. Instead, I asked if she knew what was protecting us and if anything unusual slithered out of the kitchen sink. She said our daily ritual protected us, a modern version of ancient sacrifices to the gods, and then she suggested I ask the landlord to fix my pest issues. I still had no answers. Too poor to leave the apartment and not willing to tempt fate, I decided to continue dumping half the meal in the garbage disposal. If that creature was going to protect me, I had to stay on its good side. The next day I carried the box to the kitchen, pinned the recipe to my fridge and began preparing a spicy salmon pizza, keeping a wary eye on the sink. As I turned to the recipe, running my finger down the instructions, It slipped from beneath the magnet and fell to the floor. This happened every once in a while, but this time, the glossy paper disappeared beneath the fridge. Not willing to stick my hand under there, I grabbed a wire coat hanger, stretched it out, and began fishing. I recovered a medley of cereal crumbs, a fossilized chicken wing, a pen cap, a used car salesman's business card, 2 dead roaches, my recipe, and a strange yellowed paper. Curious, I dusted it off and read it, my eyes expanding with every word. December 11th, 2013. Dear Tenant, I moved into this apartment to care for my savior. I was a hunter, you see, and I had terminal cancer. I was reckless, and I didn't care when death would choose to take me. But Alesta cared. She protected me when I challenged a bear, appearing out of the blue and nearly dying herself. No one had ever done for me what she did, and I was moved by her selflessness. Alesta got injured and lost her eyesight. She was no longer able to hunt, and I felt responsible. I invited her to live with me. With the last of my savings, I signed up for 10 years of a meal prep program. I know I won't live that long. She may not either, but I still ask you, dear tenant, to continue honoring her. Every evening, prepare the meal and leave it in the cupboard under the sink. Then, go to sleep. The next morning, if the plate is still full, do with it as you wish. If the plate is empty, don't be alarmed. Just continue to honor my savior, and you'll be safe and secure as long as you live here. Dear tenant, this is all I ask of you, fulfilling a grateful man's dying wish. Please don't mention this to anyone, especially not the landlord, but if you end up moving out, please hand this letter to the new tenant. And when the 10 years are up on December 11th, 2023, please, my friend, consider renewing. Alesta deserves it. Thank you and be blessed, Callum. I put the letter down, stunned. The creature truly was a protector. Alesta, brought here to be cared for by a man with a little time. Callum put a lot of faith in a bunch of strangers, but I guess he didn't have a choice. He could have at least told us what we were dealing with, but maybe he didn't trust we'd have Alesta's best interests at heart. I was surprised we'd all followed the rule despite how cryptic it was, well, at least until I came along. I looked at the letter again. Would I have been more inclined to abide if I'd received this? I'll never know, because one of the previous tenants misplaced it and passed on the message verbally, the request changing from person to person like a game of telephone, until we were feeding Alesta half her intended meal through the garbage disposal. Well, that wasn't going to happen anymore, and I didn't want Alesta to hide anymore either. She'd saved my life, and I wanted to improve hers. After preparing the spicy salmon pizza, I placed it on the kitchen floor and sat cross-legged in front of it. Working up the courage, I cleared my throat and called out her name. Alesta? A soft gurgle sounded from the drain. Alesta, dinner, food, yummy food. I'd never met a creature like Alesta before, and I had no idea how intelligent she was. Come out. It's okay. You don't have to eat in the drain anymore. You can live out here with me. I held my breath as she poked her head out of the sink, her nose sniffing the air. Hey, Alesta. She gurgled again. She seemed to like hearing her name. The one her only friend had given her. Well, now, she has another friend. I gestured to the pizza and smiled before I remembered she couldn't see. This pizza is all for you. I looked down with regret. I'm sorry I didn't feed you last week. I'll never do that again. I couldn't help but tense up as she slithered over, her long, slender body compressing into a bulbous form as she settled in front of me. This was going to take some getting used to. She smelled like rust and old lettuce, and I hoped she wasn't averse to baths now that she didn't have to hide anymore. 2 pointy legs protruded from her fur, and they poked around blindly until they found the plate. I watched in surprise as she split the pizza and slid half over to me, and I pushed it back. "No, it's all for you, like Callum wanted." As I said that, my stomach growled, and Alesta chirped in response and slid half towards me again. She picked up a slice and began nibbling, and I smiled, teary-eyed as I reached for my own slice. For the first time ever, I was glad I'd lost my job. And once I get a new one, neither of us will ever go hungry again. "12 Days of Snow" by Luminaria. Day 1. It was cold, though I guess that's to be expected when you're walking in the middle of a snowstorm. I was almost knees deep in a carpet of white. In hindsight, it was a dumb idea to be outside in this kind of weather, but in my defense, it wasn't this cold when I started my trip. It all just fell too quick. White fog escaped my mouth when I breathed, and I squinted through it to look down at my watch, raising it closer to my face. The needles had stopped moving at some points. It broke. Figures. I hunched further inside my jacket and tried to pull my sleeves further over my fingers before they froze. A pale shadow moved in my peripheral vision. I turned to look, but no one was there. Just snow falling and wind rustling. I sighed. My chest felt tight when the memories flooded back in. I can't recall the first time I saw those things. They've been around since I was a little kid. I knew they weren't real. Monsters don't exist. And the meds took the visions away, or used to. I couldn't pay for that sort of medicine while working at a cafe. Funny thing how the anxiety and hallucinations had been fine for my parents to deal with. Therapy, controlled meds, and hospital visits were fine too. But just me being me was past the limit. I was suddenly too much for them. Too much. Not that I was complaining. Jake had been a real bro to find this place for me when he found out my folks had kicked me out. Jake is a bro in general, the only co-worker who didn't mind switching shifts at times or cleaning the walk-in freezer, but, well, I digress. The advertisement was from some guy looking for a roommate to split house chores and rent, which was already crazy cheap, probably because the place was in the middle of nowhere, and the signal in the area was piss poor at best. But, hey, better having a roof than not. And just the thought of a heater already felt like a blessing. I could see the lights on the porch ahead already, but it seemed like an eternity passed before I reached it and pressed the doorbell. Nothing. The minutes stretched while I waited, breathing into my palms in an attempt to warm them up. I pressed the doorbell again. Nothing. There was nobody home. Oh crap, I was freezing here. "What are you doing out there, kiddo?" I lifted my head to see a man standing at the doorstep in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, lean frame, curly platinum white hair and ice blue eyes, eyebrows creased in a confused frown. I stared. He stared back. We held a staring contest for about 5 seconds before I managed to introduce myself. He ushered me inside and cranked the heating up until my teeth stopped chattering, which I was thankful for. And that's how I met Gabe. From the way he spoke, I assumed he was around my dad's age, though, judging by looks alone, I'd have believed it if someone had told me he was 25. He was one of those people who aged annoyingly well, I guess. He looked, for all intents and purposes, like a Greek statue had escaped the museum and was now walking around. Well, sort of walking if you ignore the crutches. Gabe was a veteran. I'm not sure about the details, but warded a number on his legs. He could still get around on his own, but he was slow and couldn't stand for long periods. The part on that ad about splitting house chores started making more sense then, other than, just being a common courtesy. "You can have the room upstairs. Got any luggage?" "No, just my backpack." "Okay. Make yourself at home. There's food in the fridge, but fair warning, I'm a vegetarian, so if you want meat, you go get it and cook it yourself." Day 2. The house was like a small 2-story cottage furnished in vintage style. There were antiques everywhere, or at least dupes good enough for my untrained eye not to notice a difference. There was even a corded phone in the living room, those with the twirly cable and numbers in a turning disc instead of on a keyboard. There were electrical sockets, no issue, so at least I wouldn't have to worry about keeping my phone charged. But the snowstorm outside was doing its thing, and I wasn't getting a signal, neither cell phone nor Wi-Fi. Sadly, that meant ordering a pizza was out of the question. We had eggs and toast for breakfast, where I was pleasantly surprised to find a large assortment of jams in the cupboard, and pasta with an extremely cheesy sauce for lunch. Not the lot of healthy veggies and salads I'd been expecting, but hey, if food was going to be like that every meal, I wasn't going to complain. On the lower floor was the landing and living room, a little kitchen and dining room blended space, a bathroom, an office, and Gabe's room. Upstairs was my room, another larger bathroom, and a little atrium, sunroom of sorts. Everything felt old, but in a lived-in way rather than the sunroom, which I had to dust off and sweep. Well, it made sense. It was pretty cold with the current weather, and Gabe mostly stayed downstairs, either watching the old TV in the living room, reading or painting in his office. His office smelled of ink and turpentine, and was cluttered with more books, strewn papers, frames, and canvases than should have fitted in the small room. It was hard to even walk in without tripping on something. The books were all over the place and didn't seem to follow any specific theme or language. A bunch of them I couldn't read, not even the title, but it was the paintings that were the stars of the room. Do you, sell those for a living? Nah, it's just a hobby. Gets boring here pretty fast otherwise. Well, if you ever felt like selling the paintings, they might bring in some good cash. I wasn't an artist by any means, but even I could see that they were stunning. The depth and perspective of everything, the way the sun and shade in the images felt so real. For some of them, I had to look really close to notice the brushstrokes and make sure they weren't actually pictures taken with a camera. There were flowers and still life, wide landscapes, idyllic scenes, and people partying. Hey, got any favorites, kiddo? My eyes wandered around until settling on a painting the size of a sheet of printer paper framed on the back wall. A dainty girl in a summer dress and with long wavy hair stood beneath a large tree, peeling some sort of fruit, while a pair of children sat nearby, I assumed waiting for the snacks to be handed out. While the full picture was great, it was obvious that a lot more care and effort had been put on the girl than on everything else. "That's your girlfriend?" I teased. My little sister," he simply said and shrugged. Or, how I remember her as. Haven't seen her in ages. Oh, now that was awkward. You look alike. I'll take that as a compliment, thanks, he snickered. I wasn't fully sure on how my life would keep unfolding from then on, but at least now the uncertainty wasn't as suffocating as before. For now, I liked the house, and I liked Gabe. I went to bed feeling light and hopeful, and paid no heed to the shadows flickering outside. Day 6. I woke up to a light tapping sound, repeating non-stop. I didn't know if it was too early or just the weather making the sky darker than it was supposed to be. The storm still raged on, snow falling and dulling the sounds outside, till everything felt strangely empty. I begrudgingly opened my eyes and stood up, wondering if there was a rat or some bug scurrying around. There was a face on my window, and hands gripping the sill from the outside. My heart kind of skipped a beat. I rubbed the sand off my eyes and looked again. Well, there was no one there, of course. I breathed a sigh of relief, changing clothes and heading to the bathroom to wash my face and brush my hair. I forgot the hairbrush, so I had to turn back again. And then, the face was there, cheeks and fingers patting against the window. Crackly grey skin and a mouth with too many teeth. "You're not real. I'm seeing things. I'm just seeing things," I told myself, pressing my palms against the window, trying to gather some speck of rationality my frayed nerves hadn't destroyed yet. While the glass felt cold and solid, a safe barrier between me and the face. slammed itself against the window with a dull thud. And I screamed. Gabe made his way up the stairs after a while. I'm not sure how long. When he got there, I was curled into a ball in the corner, still screaming and crying. Couldn't stop. Just that thing. That dead-looking thing. Oh, just take it away. It's okay, kiddo. It's okay now. You just breathe. I forced myself to blink. There was nothing on my window. Of course there wasn't. This was the second floor. But that face. An ashen grey face with a rusty, deformed metal plate covering half of it. Its breath fogged the window, its discoloured cheeks and fingers making low, disconcerting noises as they were rubbed against the glass pane. Sad. Old. Broken. That face was printed in my mind now. I could still see it when I closed my eyes. It felt so real, but it wasn't real. I mean, it couldn't be. God, I was going crazy. Gabe guided me into sitting down on the bed and taking deep, slow breaths, then sat down with me while I tried to focus. I was trying to regain control of my own lungs and organize my thoughts into a more coherent stream. Air in, air out, rinse and repeat. It took a couple of minutes until I was breathing more or less normally, but I still couldn't stop shaking. Gabe theorized that giving me a sugar boost might help, so we moved to the kitchen, and I sat down with a bag of ice pressed to my head while he whipped up a plate of syrupy pancakes for me. Thanks, Gabe. You're an angel. And you're a human, he snorted and patted my back. Just eat your pancakes. I did, or I nibbled the pancakes at least. They tasted good, but I just couldn't muster much of an appetite. Hey, why did you join the war? I asked. Why that question now? You don't strike me as the sort of guy who'd ever wield a gun. Why'd you do it? He said there wasn't a set reason. I could ask 10 of them why they went to the war, and I'd get 10 different answers. Some fought for freedom, a better future, or to protect others. Some fought to gain something, or because they were pressured to, or they felt like they had no choice. Some even fought just because everyone else was fighting too, so why not? My reason? None. I wasn't thinking at all. And he shook his head. My kid was murdered. One day he was out with friends, healthy and happy. Next he was dead and his face was covered in blood. That's what made me join really, really late. I just saw red and I wanted each and every one of them to suffer and die. He sighed. There was no kind word or talk of forgiveness that I'd listen to. You know what? No matter how many fell, it didn't make me feel better. No rest for the wicked, right? He chuckled, and it was the most bitter and sad sound I'd ever heard. Oh, I'm still angry, kiddo. Think I always will be. I just got tired, too. And so that was it. He lost his little boy, and then he just lost it. No honorable ideal, no nothing. Just violent and all-encompassing grief. I didn't know if that was something that should be forgiven or not, and I sure didn't ask him. I just ate my pancakes and let him keep patting my back, and I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. Day 12. Morning came with more snow, and I was starting to wonder if it would ever stop. It had been piling up for almost 2 weeks now, since the first day I'd arrived, like it was trying to gobble me up along with the whole house. We still had food for the time being, but it was starting to worry me seriously. Neither I nor Gabe had a car, and I couldn't see another house or any neighbors in the area. For how long would we be stranded in that building? Gabe told me to take it easy, mainly after what had happened the previous week, and I knew just worrying over it wasn't going to solve anything. But I was growing more and more anxious anyway, and that wasn't even mentioning the risk of me being fired because I couldn't possibly get to work. God, I prayed I wouldn't get fired. But at that rate, staying inside was going to drive me crazy, so I laid up as best I could and stepped outside, deciding I could at least do something productive and shovel the snow out of the porch. I figured that if it got too cold, I'd just go back inside, no harm done. Boy, was I wrong. A few minutes after I stepped outside, I could swear I saw something moving in the corners of my field of view. Then I turned, and there was nothing there. It was all in my head. I was getting worse, and that thought terrified me. There's no way I could pay for antipsychotics or therapy out of my own pockets. My current roommate was nice, but I only knew the guy for 2 weeks. What if I had another breakdown and he decided he didn't want to deal with me anymore? What would happen to me? Well, I had to hang in there. I needed to. A low rumble echoed from somewhere around, far away. I huffed, angrily dusting snow off the porch with both a shovel and my own shoes, and scraping the frost off the little ornamental fence, frustrated with myself. Something moved in my peripheral vision again. I squinted, straining my eyes and peering across the white horizon, and I waited, trying to convince myself there wasn't anything out there, because there shouldn't be. There was no one, nothing in that storm besides wild wind and frozen water. I was about to shove the last bit of snow off and call it a day when I saw them standing out there, by the edge of the yard, the faintest outlines of people. There were 3 of them, pale and immobile, partially camouflaged by the scenery's natural colour scheme. "Oh, what now?" I mumbled, momentarily forgetting my shovel. There weren't any people out in the storm besides me. That was the very problem I was facing, even with no one else living in that vicinity and no signal to contact civilization outside. What crazy stuff was my fried nincompoop brain trying to concoct this time? "Hello?" I called out loud. "Gabe, can you come out for a minute and check this out?" Yeah, I'm an idiot. So sue me. Oh, please don't. At least I still had half a mind to also ask her for a second opinion from someone who's probably not crazy. Except the guy was also one of the slowest walkers on the planet, so I was going to be waiting there for a while. I craned my neck and squinted once more, holding one hand cupped around my face to help me see and willing my eyes to either confirm or deny the humanoid figures standing at the very edge of my sight. Well, they were there. One seemed smaller than the other two, but I couldn't tell for sure. A child, or was it just farther away? Well, either way, they were starting to move now, staggering slightly in the snow. Maybe there really were people in there, freezing, like I'd been 2 weeks before. "Hey, you alright? Did you need help?" I called out to them. I was shouting, and even though the calling left my own lungs, I could barely hear it above the raging wind. That's my luck, I guessed. I shoveled the snow off the first couple of steps from the porch, trying to open up a path while they waddled past the yard edge. And then I bumped into something. One of the figures was suddenly beside me, and I smashed directly into it, almost sending myself cartwheeling in the snow. But instead, I found myself on my knees, looking up at a shape far too tall and grey to be a living human. He stood at least 7 feet tall, in a wispy ash-grey cloak and half-molten pieces of armour, giving it the appearance of restraints rather than protection. A loop of bone adorned its head like a bizarre crown. The thing also wore a mask, or a broken helmet made of metal. Its breath echoed weirdly through the slits, and I could imagine an abnormal amount of eyes leering at me through the shadows of its face cover. Close. Too close. His fingers were almost touching me. "Oh, come on," I groaned, picking my shovel back up and angrily started shoveling the last remnants of snow off the pathway, chiding my own brain. I couldn't even be creative. Of course I couldn't. Always the same big, lanky, creepy shit. Well, newsflash for you, you defective organ living rent-free in my skull. I already know it's not real. It doesn't exist. It shoved its hand into my chest. Solid and pointy, sharp fingers sinking past the ribcage. I sputtered, pain flaring through me so intense that I froze, twitching against the creature's hand. The weirdest part is, I wasn't bleeding. It's like the thing's fingers just passed through. Not as in an illusion or ghost passing through. No, it's as if my body was made of water and this monster ruptured that water's surface, and its fingers were now swimming inside me. I gasped and sputtered more, trying to pry it away, but it was stronger than me. They were stronger than me. The thing swarmed me, pinning me down and straddling my body, my arms pinned to my sides by grey, spindly limbs. It was like being sat on by a giant ice sculpture. My Edward Scissorhands or an ungodly blend of both. It was so cold it burned, so much I couldn't even scream. I thought the pain couldn't get any worse until it found whatever it was they were searching for in my chest and tugged it half out. It was pure, unbridled agony. Worse than if it had ripped my heart out. There was some sort of golden ball of light, its glow spilling to illuminate the porch like a weird garden lamp. It tore chunks off the light and brought them to its mouth. Christ, it was eating me. It hurts. It hurts. Oh my God, it hurts. Brother. It spoke? Someone was shouting. I turned my head slightly, trying to see what caught the thing's attention. There was Gabe, braced against the wall on the landing, flailing his crutches at the things atop me, like he was telling kids to get off his lawn. This is my domain, he started, stepping out of the house. This is my porch. Something made a weird breaking sound as he approached. It took me a second to realize it was one of the crutches, slammed against one of the creature's heads and sending it rearing into the snow. The crutch's thin wooden exterior splintered, revealing something sharp that glistened below. And this is my kid. I found him. He's mine now. You'll not have this one. I had the thought before that he didn't look like the sort of guy who'd wield a gun, and I was right. The thin twin longsword suited him a lot better, as weird as that was. His voice was starting to ring in my ears, though, distorting and echoing, like that thing's voice did. By the authority granted me hither, be gone or I'll splatter those bloody, corrupted heads of yours into smithereens, smaller than the fall itself could. The creature rose back from the snow, looking slightly disoriented, and then they all pounced at Gabe. Something in the back of my mind told me not to look, and I closed my eyes. But even through clenched eyelids and remaining prone on the ground, I could still feel a flare of light. The monsters instantly cleared away as waves of cold and heat washed over me. The noise hurt my ears, and something wet and warm started running from them and from my nose. It smelled like iron. Metal clashed against metal. I had no idea what was going on. It just hurt. It was hard to breathe. I kept my eyes closed and tried to focus on breathing despite the pain. Gabe had gone silent, but I could hear the creatures screaming weird words and curses. Something about hordes of light and betrayal and fruits. They screamed and screamed and screamed, and then, one by one, their screams became gurgling, and it all finally stopped. Still with me, kiddo? Gabe's voice asked, no longer ringing like before. Cough if you're conscious. I coughed. Okay, good. Let's get you back inside. A pair of hands slid under my armpits and dragged me back into the house. He took me into his office, placing me belly up on the couch before staggering to sit on the armrest behind my head. A dull clang told me he'd dropped his crutches, swords, onto the floor nearby. What? I coughed again. What were those things? The unnamed. 2 Grigori and a cherub, if you want to be specific. Unnamed what? They're angels from the lower rank legions who were never given individual names. They lost their light in the fall and keep trying to get it back by eating others, which doesn't work, by the way. Gabe sighed. You can open your eyes, it's safe now. I forced my eyes open, fighting against the blurriness in my vision. Something wet and cold was dripping onto my wound. Drip, drip. Gabe mumbled to himself, groaning in frustration. I don't understand. This is what she did. Am I doing something wrong? Black. His blood was black. His hand was raised above the ball of light still on my chest. His palm was bleeding, a thick tar-colored liquid oozing from it and onto the light. Drip, drip, drip. For some reason I couldn't understand, the black drops that fell onto the light sizzled and started shining along, and as the gold glow slowly got brindled with silver, the searing pain in my chest started to dull a little bit. "Gabe?" "Right here, kiddo." He smiled. "Gabe," I gasped. "Am I dying?" "You're not." He ruffled my hair with his other hand. "Souls are infinite. They can't be destroyed." "Then why does it hurt?" His face scrunched up, somewhere between a grimace and a wince. "Well, they can't be destroyed, but they can be torn." I stared at the silver glow, soft and dim compared to the gold. A blank filling patchwork like scar tissue. There was a piece of me that wasn't there anymore. My identity, likes and dislikes, memories. It was hurting because there was a gap in me. Gabe was filling it back up, but he wasn't me, and he couldn't give me what he didn't have. He couldn't replace what was taken from me exactly as it was before. All the while he kept asking me a lot of things, random things. My age and blood type, my favorite color, the name of my childhood dog. I didn't have a dog. My opinion on carrots, and so on. He made me retell everything I've told here. Why I'd needed to move, and how I found his house. "Hey, what's your name?" Nothing left my mouth. I couldn't remember. I knew Gabe, and I told him what I was called when we introduced ourselves to each other, but I couldn't remember my own freaking name. "Your name's Taylor," he sighed and patted me on the head. "Why are you here?" "Because I couldn't stay at my folks' place anymore. Well, they didn't take me coming out well, so I had to find somewhere cheap. A friend at work found out I was looking for a place to move and showed me an ad of someone looking for a roommate. He told me to go check it out." "Oh, good. And then?" "As I was going to, Dad popped up at the end of my shift after everyone left. Said he wanted to talk. He was so drunk. And after? I told him to leave. Said it was closing time and I had to go. He started yelling at me. I yelled back. He shoved me and I stumbled into the freezer. And the door closed and it was so cold and my breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't remember getting out, only walking and walking. It was so cold and I was freezing. I reached a porch and Gabe opened the front door. I already died, didn't I? He took a long while to respond. I watched him just staring out of the window into the never-ending snowstorm outside, brows furrowed like he was weighing his options. Wonder what he was thinking. Could have kept me at his place forever, watching TV, complaining of the weather, and eating meals together. A feeble substitute to the family he'd lost. But he didn't force me to stay. You're not dead yet, he finally said, and let out a long breath. You're in the realm Adam and Eve were expelled from, where my kind has dwelt since before the War of Heaven. It's a place all souls return to when they die, either attracted towards their assigned guardian's domain or guided here by them. But one doesn't need to be dead to come here. Humans with Nephilim ancestry, oracles, mediums, and astral projectors, or whatever you call them nowadays, well, they have the ability to walk or at least peek into here to some degree. Others can reach this place through occult rituals or crossing thresholds in places where the boundaries are blurry. But there are cases, like yours, when a body just gets so damaged they're almost dead. Almost, but not quite. So the soul wanders out until your body is fit enough to house you again. Problem is, the longer you stay out or interact with anyone here, the harder it is for you to go back. Your connections to the other side fray. So, you better get going soon. Wait, so you're my guardian angel? He shook his head. Well, I've not taken in any children since Yeshua died. I'm not sure why you came to me. Maybe your actual guardian is dead, or maybe your soul was still unclaimed. You just got here by chance. He huffed and then shrugged and gave the tiniest of smiles. Well, either way, I'm glad you got here. You've made the house feel like a home for a little while. I felt like crying again. Heck, I did cry again. No shame about that. It started with a sob, and soon I was bawling and didn't stop for a while. I wish my parents had told me that too, that they were happy to have me. They probably never would, I knew, but someone else did, and the amount of relief I felt almost made my heart explode. You need to get back to your body, kiddo, he said, after giving me a moment to calm down. And how do I do that? I asked. Do I just have to wake up somehow? Gabe grimaced again. If you don't know the way, I have to send you back. But I've been trying to since you got here. I don't understand why it's not working. What is it I'm missing? He trailed off, his gaze shifting to stare at the painting across the room. Well, it has to work both ways. He speed-walked across towards the painting, faster than I'd seen him move ever before. There was an awful noise of ceramic cracking when he did. So I guess he could run when he wanted to. It looked painful, and his steps left bloody, blackish footprints in his wake. I had to suppress a second-hand wince on his behalf. He took the painting from the wall, out of its frame, and into an envelope along with a note he hastily scribbled. A deal's a trade between two parts, so it won't work if it's one-sided. I do something for you that you couldn't do alone. You do something for me that I couldn't do. I had no idea what he was rambling on about. I wasn't even in the right realm of existence, for heaven's sake. What could I possibly do for him that he couldn't? Taylor. The sound of my own name again made me feel dazed. Do you want to go back? I nodded. I need to send this parcel. Can you deliver it for me? I nodded again and suddenly felt very sleepy. I think I remember him smiling with relief and nodding back at me, but not sure if he really did or if I was just dozing off. And everything faded into a blur of white. I woke up to the bright fluorescent lights of a hospital room, with an IV attached to my arm and half lulled, half risen by the beeping of medical machinery. They said I was in that walk-in fridge for 12 hours, between the time when my shift ended and when someone found me at the start of the morning shift and called an ambulance. 12 hours, in contrast to the 12 days I'd spent at Gabe's place. It was a miracle I was alive and didn't lose any body parts due to frostbite. I heard at first that the hospital had intended to contact my parents, but the police had gotten involved. Once the camera footage at my work was reviewed and they saw my dad, well, you can guess. So the doctors contacted my grandparents instead. It's weird to think of it. They were iffy about me before, too, thinking I was just going through a difficult phase and needed to snap out of it, and so on, but when they heard I'd almost died, they ran straight to see me. I've moved in with them. Well, they're old, so there's a lot of things that they still don't get, but they're trying to learn and are being supportive. It's made me cry like a fountain a couple of times by now, but in a nice way. I think I've become an official crybaby, but who cares? Well, that was all back in November. Been seeing a therapist since then. She's nice, though I'm pretty sure she doesn't believe me when I told her about Gabe. Heck, I don't think I'd believe it either if I heard it from someone else. I only know that it was real and not just a trauma-induced hallucination, because I still have his letter. The envelope was on the nightstand when I woke up in the hospital, tucked inside my backpack along with the rest of my stuff. It wasn't sealed shut, so I've looked through it a couple of times. There's the painting, just as I remembered, and a letter. I can't read the letter. I don't understand the language at all. The words are not in any alphabet I can recognize, and I start getting migraines when I look at them for too long. There's only one thing I can read, the two words inscribed on the outside of the envelope, probably so I'd know who would receive it. To Lucy. Well, there's no address to mail it to anywhere. Maybe I was supposed to just know where to go, and there are times when it feels like I do. Sometimes I'm walking home from work or just taking a stroll, and I feel like taking a detour somewhere strange for no reason. to skip off the trail while hiking and head into the woods or into some dark alleyway I can't see the end of. Shaded corners, dark corridors, liminal spaces. All the times it's happened, I willed some sense back into myself and went home. Yeah, the unnamed angels are one reason, but I also don't want to get mugged, you know. But it's gotten to the point past just curiosity. It became an almost unavoidable compulsion. Last week I zoned out while washing dishes after dinner, and when I came to, it was 1 a.m. and I was stepping into the yard of some abandoned building on the other side of town. It's not that I don't want to fulfill my promise to Gabe. He helped me, he saved me. I owe him that much. Even if I didn't, I don't know how much longer I can delay it anyway. The new year is approaching, and the whole world will be at a threshold. I guess I just wanted someone to know what really happened. I've queued this to be posted automatically on January 1st. Well, hopefully I'll still be here to catch it and add a little edit like, "Hey, I survived," or similar afterward, and just laugh at how silly I was being. But I'm scared. When I get wherever this deal is leading me to, Gabe won't be there to help or to send me back. And if that was really Gabriel, as in the Archangel Gabriel, then I can guess also who Lucy is. I don't think I'll make it back again. Great Auntie Madsen by T.J. Lee. For as long as I'd known, there'd always been a Great Auntie Madsen. She's always someone you needed to fear. And my family's always been good at keeping secrets. Some of them were small and mundane, the kind that any family does to spare their loved ones' feelings when it comes to a completed art project, a kind gesture, or a false compliment. Some families have those bigger secrets, the taboo ones that nobody talks about. A family member who committed a horrible crime, a tragedy, or something horrible that binds the family together in a way outsiders can never understand. For us, that was Great Auntie Madsen. Well, supposedly my great-uncle Zephaniah had been in love with a local girl. His family forbade it under the guise that her family was of suspicion and stooped in heinous activity. But Zephaniah would not be deterred. Well, their love grew and she eventually fell pregnant. She became very cautious, knowing how the family would react, and stipulated he must only see her in a certain location at certain times, a place in the woods nearby Zephaniah's, a spot where they could build a life together, perhaps. But someone in the family discovered the secret and forced Zephaniah, under duress, to lead them to where the lovers met. When he only led them partway in, revealing he had a baby with the woman, he was shot by his father, my great-great-grandfather, Obadiah, in a fit of rage. Upon hearing the gunshot, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream through the woods, declaring a curse on the whole Monroe family. Then, in front of Obadiah and his cohorts, she set herself on fire, baby in her arms. From that day forward, upon the encroaching end of every Monroe family man, a woman hidden behind a black veil would appear and weep around the home. If they didn't resist, they would die of natural causes regardless of their age. Naturally, there have been many members of the family who disobeyed that and tried to look at her. Some even succeeded, I'm told. But all met a terrible end. Great Uncle Fugue called her the veiled skank who cost his brother his life, and spat on her when she first came to the property and began weeping by his bedside. He was found several days later mauled by a bear, his genitals torn to shreds and his face practically peeled off from the top down as if he'd been scalped. After Ford's funeral, Great-Grandma Agnes tried dousing her with a bucket of holy water, calling her Satan's little bitch, and telling her that Jesus ruled her home. Evidently he didn't. She later took herself to the top of the property, stood out on the roof, and hurled herself from it and onto the roof of the well below, her spine snapping in two and folding her inwards as her body plummeted into the well below. Obadiah said he could hear the weeping from the well constantly taunting him, but he learned from his errors and never sought to disrupt Madsen when she came to visit. He abided by her, gave her a room, and told the rest of the Monroe family to never bother her. When she came to his home in his advanced age, weeping and pointing a finger at him, he didn't resist. He just asked for forgiveness. So it went. Some people resisted, others accepted. Our family grew, and the secret was kept until it reached my generation. It was the summer of 1997 when I first met great Auntie Madsen. "Travis, sometimes she'll come to visit us. It's important you know that she's a little, different." My father would try to explain to a rambunctious 6-year-old me who was still not great at understanding the whole different thing. But there was a palpable fear in his eyes, that kind of instinctive terror that made you pay attention. The unmistakable sense that if your parents, the strongest people you knew, were scared, maybe you should be too. She'll never speak to you and never bother you, but, and this is important, son, you must never try to look at her or talk to her, understand? He had his hands on my shoulders, looking directly at me and making me nervous as I hastily nodded. "Now don't ever look at her face, and don't make any contact with her. Just be polite and don't bother her, and it'll all be over quickly." She didn't turn up with a ton of luggage and a merry song in her heart, a scowl on her face with thunder clapping behind her, or any kind of grandiose introductions that TV and films had taught me to believe happened when a weird family member came to stay. No. Instead, she turned up at 2:30 in the morning when I'd gotten up to pee. I remember on the long walk back hearing the soft, unmistakable sound of a person sobbing. It was something you're hardwired to detect and immediately run towards. So naturally, even in my half-asleep state, I did just that. I picked up my pace from the bathroom and headed down the hallway to inspect the sound. It seemed to be echoing from our study. But as I readied to turn the corner for our stairs, I felt a strong grip on my forearm pull me back. I was about to scream when I saw it was my dad, wide-eyed and filled with fear as he put a finger to his lips, shaking his head firmly. It took me a few moments to catch my breath, but I nodded. He pointed sharply to my bedroom and I walked back, the weeping growing louder as I shut the door and pulled the covers over my head. Maybe it was the adrenaline wearing off, or that kind of level of fear where your body wears out quickly, but I passed out not too long after. It was the next morning when my parents sat me down and told me my cousin Grant, who lived a few blocks down the road, had been killed. They said it was a failed home invasion, but such is the way later in life, I'd come to find out the truth was far more gruesome. That night, a friend of Grant's had found his way into the property armed with a bunch of tools and evil intentions. He'd stopped taking his medication and believed he was possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo, destined to eat human flesh. He drugged, subdued, and tortured the entire family, but only Grant would be subjected to his cravings for flesh. When the police found the man hunched over my cousin's body, a piece of Grant's muscle was still dangling from his teeth as he screamed at them, lunging forward and into the path of a spray of bullets. At his funeral, great Auntie Madsen stood in the back of the procession, weeping as his coffin was lowered into the ground. We don't know what he did to upset her, but we can assume he interfered somehow. For being a child, I just thought she was a weird relative, and did as I was told when it came to keeping the secret, knowing full well that I get punished if I revealed the strange occasional visitor to my home. And so it went on for over a decade. She would visit one of our homes, we would accommodate, and when we knew who was due to go, we paid our respects. Most of the time it went without major incident. Our family had grown in common sense as the years passed, and nobody wanted to die a horrific death. Well, that all changed when I was 19, and she came for my mother. It was a Saturday night, and we'd been watching B-movie sci-fi films, laughing at the bad CGI and the low-quality acting. Mom's laughter was infectious, filling the room way more than should be possible for such a small woman. She'd always kept herself in great shape, focused on her health, and raised me even while holding down a full-time job as a psychologist. Dad worked long hours, and she never missed a beat. She was a role model of mine. Seeing a pillar of strength crumble when great Auntie Madsen walked into the living room, 6 foot tall, face hidden behind a thick black veil and her frame hunched over as she wept, pointing at my mum. It hurt more than words could justify. Her laughter faded. Her already small body looked smaller. Her eyes sank and she nodded, never breaking eye contact. I remember those next few moments as if they'd happened in slow motion. My father screaming to stop, my mother's look of pure terror as I flung myself forward and stood between her and this spectre trying to take her away from me. "You cannot have her or my dad. You need to find another family member. I don't care who." I stood defiantly staring up at this towering figure, the black veil hiding an expression that I was sure was curled into malice. The smell of rot hit my nostrils, but I refused to back down. Mom turned me around and pulled me in for a hug so tight, I thought she'd break my back, her weeping into my shoulder matching that of great Auntie Madsen. "Oh, my sweet boy, I love you so much, but that's a choice I cannot let you make," she said between sobs, her hands digging into my back, desperate not to let go. "We all have our time, and you know what happens if we interfere with it, with her. Let this happen." I was about to protest when she pulled away, tears streaming down her face, and stared beyond me, towards something I was never meant to see. For some reason, maybe in response to my defiance or to send a message, great Auntie Madsen had lifted her veil. Mom's face twisted, and I saw something in her I'm unable to take from my mind even now, a decade later. Mind-destroying fear. Her eyes widened, pupils dilated, veins grew large on her temples, and her jaw slacked open to let out a scream that threatened to burst my eardrums as she pushed me out of harm's way. Dad shielded my eyes, and we looked away as the screaming continued. Great Auntie Madsen's sobbing turned into full-blown wails, as it accompanied my mum's suffering. It was a chorus of pain that I don't ever want to hear again as long as I live. After a few minutes, I could smell burning in the air, and despite my dad's insistence, I pulled away to look at where it was coming from. Standing there, hand in hand with Madsen, veil now in its rightful place, was my mother's steadily burning body. The flesh melting from her face, and chunks of it were falling to the ground in a slob, her screaming still continuing as she reached out a charred hand. "Don't ever resist," she screeched before the smoke filled the room, forcing us to leave the house in a stupor and call the fire department. A neighbor had to hold me back as I fought to get back into our home, screaming, "That's my mom, she's in there," until my legs gave out and I sobbed. I remember looking over at Dad, his stoic stare never once breaking with the living room window. He knew she was in there, and he knew she would come back again one day for him, for us all. Years would pass, and eventually I would see more cousins taken by great Auntie Madsen's deft hand and guttural sobs. I moved out, keeping myself near my father, married and had children of my own, desperate to start a life separately from the Monroe curse. I told my wife of it when we got engaged, warning her of what awaited her, but I don't think she ever took me seriously. I don't blame her. Nobody would if it wasn't in front of them. But that brings us to the present day, to why I'm sat in my study and shaking in my mind on the brink of sanity. A few weeks ago I heard the familiar wailing outside of my home. At first I chalked it up to that of some drunk, homeless or mentally ill person. But when it persisted and woke up my children on more than one occasion, I began to worry it was her. I hadn't moved that far from my dad's place, so my instinct was that she'd come for him. I video called him and asked if he'd seen her, but he seemed detached when I tried to press him for a reply. "Travis, you need to keep a close eye on your family, not worrying about me," he said bluntly, emotionally detached from the conversation. I was confused and, to be truthful, a little upset. "What do you know that I don't, Dad? If they're at risk, I need you to tell me," I pressed. "Everyone in our family is at risk," he snapped, startling me. "That's what being a Monroe means. We're all at risk and we always will be." He sighed, calming himself down. "Oh, look, I'm sorry. I've just been worried about this happening. Your grandfather always told me we were fine if she came into the home and we accommodated. Oh, honey, I'm just stepping outside for a sec, okay? My wife called me from the hallway. I shouted back to let her know I'd heard before turning back to the call. Well, she's been wandering the roads outside my home for the past few days, so that's why I was worried. It was only the third time in my life I'd seen my father look so pale. What do you mean she's roaming outside? She doesn't do that, she just invites herself in, he said, stumbling over his words. You sure it's her? Could just be a stranger, someone who's not well. I know it's her, Dad. We spent enough time around her to know the difference. She just turns up and wails for a bit before going off. Well, I thought she was after you. I paused, realizing how nonchalantly I was discussing what is, in actuality, a horrifying familial tradition. Why would she do this? Both of us stared for a moment before a horrifying realization hit us both at the same time. I sprung from the desk as Dad ran outside and raced to our street. But there was no time. I got to my front door just in time to see my wife, who'd never fully absorbed the stories and believed them, walking determinedly towards Great Aunt Madsen and defiantly telling her to leave the property. You're scaring our kids and I can't get a wink of sleep, she shouted authoritatively. Well, my wife always had a temper. She was a former Marine and was fiercely protective of me and the kids. You need to leave or I'll call the police. You got that? Madsen stretched out an arm, and I watched in horror as my wife pulled her over her shoulder and judo slammed her to the ground, the veil slipping as I screamed. My dad did the same as he turned the corner. My wife, my poor, wonderful, clueless wife, just stared as this creature snapped its body straight, rose up to its feet, and lifted the veil fully as I turned and shielded my eyes, grateful the kids were asleep and too young to get out of their rooms. What happened next is not something I'm mentally equipped to put down here or anywhere, but she's gone now. My amazing wife of 3 years and mother to my 2 children is gone. Police just put homicide on the report and said they'd be in touch, but I know they never will be. The boys keep asking where Mommy is, and I croakily answer, gone to stay with Great Auntie Madsen. And every time I do, I feel my soul die a little bit more inside. I sent the boys to stay with their grandpa this morning, giving them a manila envelope for them to open when they're both much older. In it are photos of us as a family, an apology letter to each of them and their inheritance, both monetary and familial. Great Auntie Madsen had stood at the front of my bed last night, her shoulders hunched up and her body as tall as ever, leaning over me, weeping just a few feet from my own face. I knew what it meant, and I was in no position to argue this time. Well, I've come to a realization that whatever Great Auntie Madsen is, whatever my family's past, present or future may define her to be, she is clever. She does not take disrespect lightly, and she knows how to hit you where it hurts. As I finish this up, I can hear her sobbing, increasing in its pain, nails gently scratching the door of my study, but I won't open them just yet. I need time to process. I don't even know how long I have once I greet her again, but I can guess. You see, she lifted her veil once I woke up, and I truly understood the depths of her cruelty, the need for her to send a message to the rest of my family, and why you must never disobey when she enters our home. Because the face looking back was my wife's, eyeless and muscles protruding beneath cracked skin, the mouth stuck in a perpetual, dislocated scream. So something a little different there from what I usually do, a collection of shorter stories. Hope you enjoyed the vibe, the atmosphere I tried to create in this one. And if not, then, well, I'll just go back to reading longer stories. I'll do that anyway, because I've got so many things lined up over the next few weeks. I don't even know where to begin to tell you what's going to come. Anyway, so that was a little bit different. Hope you enjoyed those. And, of course, I will be back again on my other channel tomorrow night with the podcast. If you're not familiar with the podcast, it's a collection of stories I've done in the past, thematically arranged
as a podcast. So yeah, I have a second channel, Dr. Creepin's Dungeon, for that. And over here, I'll be back again on Wednesday evening. I've got some more zombie stories lined up. I haven't done one of those for a while. So yes, a lot of you are really enjoying that Zombie Outbreak Across America series, and I will be returning with that very soon. Till then, my dear friends, that's enough for one evening. See you next time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.